So it obviously wouldn't be a panel about the future of advertising if we didn't talk about AI, if you haven't heard enough about that after the last 20 minutes. So let me start with you, Shruti. Obviously, AI has had an explosion, particularly around personalization, and Meta itself have invested billions in AI, particularly in their marketing engine. Did you want to talk to us about AI capabilities that your ad clients are utilizing the most and sort of how you see that growing over the next 12 months?
Yeah, absolutely. I think for us, of course, our business model only works when our clients are seeing the results that they are looking for, the business outcomes that they're looking for from our platform. And that's exactly where all of our AI investments are centered. And you mentioned billions. It's in $65 to $70 billion of capital expenditure this year that is going into this AI infrastructure to exactly power all of these underlying technologies that go into our AI systems. And there are 5 big things that we see happening as a result of that. The first is going to be better advertising, and I'm going to touch on that. The second is more engaging content that can be created with the power of AI. The third is business messaging and how we're going to utilize messaging for doing the next era of customer engagement. The fourth is Meta AI, which is our AI assistant. And finally, the wearables, and I hope people have tried the Meta Ray-Bans, which is, as I say, the most stylish way of trying our AI capabilities. Going back to that first aspect of the better advertising, it's not something of the future. Our clients are using this today and finding great uses of it. There's so many places we could go, but if I touch on 2 things, the first is on everything to do with generative AI, creativity, and creators. And that is where, we just heard Vanessa talk about that as well, which is that we say supercharge creativity and so on. What does that really mean? The mundane tasks are being taken on by AI, but then AI is being utilized in really incredibly fascinating ways of analyzing, say, millions of comments that users are putting out about a product and using that to make the brief for what should be the next set of advertising that we do about it. So really aiding the people that are the creative minds that are building on creatives. And the second is our automation set of tools, which is allowing our system to find the right audience for the right creative at the right time. And we did what was the largest test, I believe, we've ever run on Meta platforms, where every ad for a period of 1 month, and I think that was about 1 million ad campaigns that we analyzed in a test and control manner to see clients that were utilizing our automation tools and those that weren't. There was a 25% incremental higher return on ad spend for those that were using our automation tools. And that just tells you that in this time when we want every dollar to go further, every pound to count, that is exactly relying on that power of AI is so crucial for our advertisers.
Yeah, absolutely. As a user of that ourselves at Adobe, I can vouch for that. So, Stephen, let's bring you in here. So what are your members saying about AI to deliver personalization at scale? Where are they seeing it? Where do you think it's at today?
Well, I think I'm going to echo quite a lot of what Stefan and Vanessa were saying about, first of all, the rapid adoption of AI in the industry. I mean, we started talking about this beyond the big platforms probably a couple of years ago. And the speed and rapidity of change, I think, is incredible. But I've just actually come off a 2-day AI and advertising course, which has been very helpful. And one of the points that was made was that the industry is still largely deploying AI to optimize, whereas actually its power is transformation. So business is changing completely. And Stefan talked about the journey that WPP are on. But we're at the foothills, I think, of the transformation that's going on. And I think there's another massive theme that AI is going to bring to advertising, but in effect, advertising is serving all consumer-facing businesses to consumer-facing businesses, is that transformation that will happen in all those supply chains. And I think one indication of that is the rapid growth of the amount of companies that advertise. So if you look in the UK, there are 5.5 million businesses. 3.5 million of them now use advertising. So that number goes up every single year. So over 60% of businesses use advertising. Now, all of those advertisers will be using digital platforms. Larger ones will be obviously using other media, and the very largest will be using broadcast. But there'll be thousands using those very large media sets, and then millions using digital media. And I think that point about the democratization of creativity that is going to be allowed through the application of these tools. And thinking about not just about that for advertising, but what's that going to do for competition in our marketplace? We have a hyper-competitive economy. We have a very strong SME sector in the UK. In many ways, the UK is exceptional when you look at the digital penetration, the size of the market, way ahead of other European markets, very close to China and the US. So I think that when you think about the ripple effects on the economy of the deployment of these tools, I think that's the really exciting thing, the transformation not just of our business, but of every business and how it serves its customers.
Yeah, absolutely, I agree. And obviously with that explosion of advertisers, the ability to create personalization at scale, measurement starts to become ever more interesting. I think measurement in advertising is a huge topic always anyway. But with this, obviously, being able to do it real time in Meta, TikTok, in individual platforms is obviously fantastic for advertisers. But what does that mean for the measurement industry, Patrick? What are you thinking at Kantar? Is AI coming into the mix at Kantar?
So massively. So let me make the pitch for the measurement. I've done that for a year, by the way, guys, trying to sell Kantar Media. So that's my pitch for measurement as the foundation of the ecosystem. Now, look, the good thing is, and I think I said that last year, but I hope everyone realizes in the room that the UK is at the forefront of the measurement industry, right? Not only the UK has the most advanced joint industry committee with Barb, but the UK is about to launch the first cross-platform post-campaign validation tool with Origin. So 2 big leading-edge innovation measurement. No other country has that in the world. And I can say that in French. Forget the Champions Cup on Saturday. The second thing that is interesting is the last 12 months I've seen one thing coming to bear, which is we're entering the age of the hybrid measurement, which is a combination of the panel, which I think is there to stay, although in a different form, amplified by AI, massively amplified by AI, with first-party data coming from the platform, coming from everyone. Because frankly, everyone is a platform. I see my old friends from Sky right there. Sky has an enormous amount of data. Sky is a streaming platform to a large extent as well in that process, right? And I think the future of measurement is how do we combine quickly, cheaply, innovatively using AI, the power of the panel with all that primary data coming from different sources that are not that comparable, right? There's a lot of issues. Comparing data from Meta and Google, not the easiest thing to do, every day of the week. But I think that's where the innovation comes from. And we should be able to do it with AI much cheaper and much faster to do that.
That's interesting. And Deborah, let's bring you in here. What's Disney's point of view around measurement? What are the current challenges you're seeing and what are you hearing from your clients?
Hi everyone, good to be here. So I'll start with what we're hearing and then I'll touch briefly on some of the challenges. So we obviously started advertising on our streaming products less than 2 years ago, but we've been obviously in EMEA, in local markets for decades with our linear and other digital properties. And what we're actually hearing at the most foundational level, to Patrick's point, isn't that different at the foundational level. People want independent, panel-based quality research. So as you've already alluded to, panels like Barb, which are of course excellent, and we were actually the first streamer on Barb back in 2021. And then I think, as everybody's been saying, with addressable and digital, the expectation is much more data-driven, advanced analytics, so that our clients can really measure and paint a picture of not just audience behaviors, but ultimately for television as well, outcomes, which is, of course, where we're going. And I think that that's great for us too. We've been developing our proprietary data and tech stack for over 10 years in the US now. And at the heart of that is an amazing audience graph, actually, which it's unbelievable. They have something like 200,000 audience attributes and 20,000 different buying segments that you can buy and measure against, which I think ultimately, we will be rolling that out here, obviously in a lighter version, and that's super, super exciting. We're already starting with working with people like the Audience Project on that. And then the final thing on what we're hearing, then I do want to touch on a couple of challenges because it's important, and I've got Patrick here, so I'm doing a bit of a pitch to Patrick. is that the buyers and planners, they want flexibility. So just like, everybody wants to buy the way that they want to buy, which we also believe in, DSPs, marketplaces, direct IOs, they also want to use the vendors that they want to use, and we support that as long as they're high quality. I think a big challenge, and I'm sure some of you in the room face into this, is that, when you've got a global, we're a global platform, and every one of the local markets that we work in with the jigs to this foundational level for the platform, the panel-based research, they all have slightly different technical roadmaps and measurement integrations, which for us is quite tricky to deal with. So the way that Médiamétrie and Kantar want to do it in France is different to the way that Barb want to do it. It's different to Audicom in Italy and different to Germany. And I think that when you've obviously got privacy at your core, so you have to be completely compliant, obviously, and you need a robust solution, that's actually quite hard to do at pace when everybody is operating slightly differently technically. So I think it's incumbent on us to come together to try and come up with solutions that are just a bit more consistent. So Patrick. Yeah.
No, I completely agree with that. One caveat is that Italy is a Nielsen market, which is our arch rival, but
yeah.
With all the respect
arch
for
rivals,
Nielsen.
they're the evil, these research people. Yeah.
And please don't let the European Union look at that, because that is going to slow down things even more. I think you're raising an important point, which I think also some of your friends at Meta have raised with us as well, which is we're entering a world where when we build a new service or we integrate a new platform into measurement, we cannot think anymore in terms of months or years, which is the way we've done it historically. We need to think in terms of weeks and maybe months in some instances. That means getting to a level of commonality in the standards. There's multiple ways to merge and do data fusion between big data and panel without going too technical. We are pushing, but I think we have a long way to go to try to get to some form of standardization so that we can lift and shift a lot faster to do that.
Presumably AI ends up helping there at some point.
You've got to agree on what it is first, right? Is it tagging? Is it watermarking? Is it audio matching? You've got to first decide what it is. And as you can imagine, the French love their watermarking. God bless them. The Italians have a different approach. I think Barbie is very well advanced in terms of tagging in that process. It's different approaches.
Okay, Shruti, maybe your world's slightly simpler because it's so digital and you're a walled garden. What are your thoughts around measurement? What are you hearing from your customers?
Yeah, it's definitely something that I'm one of the top 3 things that I'm talking to clients about. I'm not quite sure, say it's simple, because honestly, what is, like, I really try and square that in my head. No matter which client we speak to, everybody is facing the challenges that we have on inflation, the rising costs, the high cost of debt, the macro challenges, some new changes on the tariff side. It just is hitting businesses from every side, which is where every dollar needs to count. And in light of that, it's particularly stark when we see a study which says if we're spending based on last click, 35% of that spending is actually not going to find you any incremental sales. You're getting people that you would have gotten anyway, sales that would have happened anyway. So in that time, it just feels like that is a big miss, and it's 78% of companies still say they rely on last click as their way of measuring. And that is something that we're talking a lot to clients about, to focus on incrementality. And there is no one answer of how companies are doing it, but honestly, moving away from that one source of truth to how can we, the role we see ourselves playing is, how can we help enable that suite of products, that measurements and different sources of truth, at least, that companies can rely on to look at whether it is an external third party that they're integrating with, media mix modeling, whatever it is, which is different from the one source of truth, the last click, that one attribution. How can we build that in our own tools, our own ads manager that clients are relying on? That's what we're talking a lot about.
It's crazy to me so many people are still on last click, but then it's so expensive in terms of attribution and developing those models. It shouldn't surprise me.
Yeah, and it's the opportunity cost, though. If we're not doing that, perhaps we might be spending, which we would have anyway gotten.
No, agreed. So maybe we can come back to you, Stephen, when we've all been talking before around, themes and the future of advertising. We've talked a lot about authenticity and trust, with the way the world is at the moment, that's always a big topic. What's the Advertising Association observing around trust in advertising? Where is that feeling at the moment?
Well, we've been tracking trust and favourability in advertising for decades. So we've got a really interesting picture about the performance of advertising over time. And it was in a long-term decline. And round about the mid-2016, 2017, it started to bottom out as a decline. Now, if you look at trust in the ad industry, it's pretty much bottom of the industries that we track, alongside the government and alongside the media, actually. So there are three that rival for bottom place.
Great.
So we sort of see those two jockeying around. But if you look at trust in advertising, so not the ad industry, but advertising, what people consume, what people see, we've seen a relatively strong increase in that since 2022. And there's a whole number of factors behind that. We do correlation analysis to look at all the other variables that we're tracking to see what drives that. And we know there are 5 key factors that are driving rising trust in advertising. And it's gone from 32% of the population trusting advertising to, at the end of 2024, 39%. So steady increase. Now, I would imagine most people in the room would think that trust in advertising is on the slide. It's on the rise. And I think that's a really important message for us to have about our industry. The public trust us more. And the rise in public trust, we look at it demographically. Look at the average age of the room here. You're going to be in the camp that don't trust advertising very much. It's driven by the young. So the under 35s are really driving the rise in trust. And there's a particular cohort within that, 25 to 34s, really driving rising trust. And that's a really interesting experience to reflect why that is the case, because obviously they're digital-first consumers. So we think it's partly to do with the ad experience that in all the platforms and all the consumption that they have. But we do know the single biggest factor in the UK driving rising public trust, and it's a blindingly obvious one. It's because we now advertise that the advertising is regulated by the ASA. So there's many media owners here in the room that donate money every year to support this campaign to tell the public that advertising in all channels is regulated by the ASA. So it's the classic sort of Bobby on the beat thing. If you see a policeman, you feel safe. If you know there's a regulator that is basically making sure all advertising, one of the great end lines the ASA have had for decades, legal, decent, honest, and truthful. So we have that end line. We remind people that all advertising they see in all channels is regulated. And those people who are aware of that advertising trust advertising twice as much as the people who don't.
That's
so there are other factors that are correlating on that, sustainability, more inclusive advertising, various other things, but overwhelmingly it's being driven by awareness of the fact that we're a well-regulated industry with an independent regulator.
And the young, I mean, try not to be offended at being called old, everybody in the room. Shruti, maybe.
Been really offensive there.
Let's come to you, Shruti, maybe. In talking about that generation, influencer marketing has blown up over the last few years. And knowing that the younger age groups tend to be much more online, let's talk about Meta's move into that area. I know that you guys have really lent in on the influencer space. Did you want to talk to us about the ways brands are trying to build that more authentic connection?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting what you were saying about the younger audiences. Again, I read about it and think, that's so different from us. But it's really fascinating to see how they have these micro trends that they are consumers of and following and have micro passions as opposed to these bigger, larger trends that maybe older demographics are drawn towards. And actually that's where we're seeing influencer marketing, which we're actually more moving towards creator marketing, because we found that the term influencer sometimes comes with this baggage of, well, this might be a really big personality that may have their own style, which may not fit with how businesses and the ethos that a large business in particular, might want to associate with. But creators it's a whole economy, a new profession that's been created where these are individuals and teams that are able to really understand and tap into the culture and the conversation and understand what is happening in that minds of that younger generation to create really authentic content. And again, research shows that people actually think that this is and have higher trust and rely a lot more on creator-led marketing than if you consider any traditional advertising, which we think is fascinating, but that's exactly why the creator economy is expected to be $500 billion in the next 2 years. And it's something that we are seeing lots of large businesses, small businesses all tap into, and creators combined with AI, I think we're seeing some really strong business results on the back of that.
Just to build on that, we see in our tracking that, let's say, 4 years ago, largely the level of trust amongst the young on creators and influencers was pretty low. It has rocketed in the last 4 years, and it's now not far off the levels of trust in the most trusted media, which tend to be TV, cinema, and radio, tend to be the most trusted. So amongst the younger cohort, creator advertising is rising very, very fast. It's within 3 or 4% now of the very well-established, highly trusted media. So that shift is incredibly quick. And I think I was to echo that point about authenticity and micro trends. You can find a creator for any interest you have. And I think that's and people build their worlds around those interests. I think
Exactly. And that's why I think the Unilever CEO has said that they are increasing their influencer marketing budget, is how he says it, 20x, not by 20%, 20x is where they are directing their money.
It's a lot. And then obviously, Patrick, how should people start to think about measuring that trust-based? What metrics are brands looking at, and where should they be looking?
Well, look, I think what you guys said point to one thing, which is which we find comforting, which is the old frontier between brand and performance advertising are completely blurring, right? Anyone that has been on one of the social platforms lately known that brands think they can get within 20 to 30 seconds from head, heart to the hand in terms of purchase in the process. And that is a good thing. Now, what that means for us is usually measurement companies like us on Nielsen or the little startup you mentioned, the Audience Project, tend to focus on the upper part of the funnel, which is essentially around reach and frequency around that process. We need to move down the funnel all the way down to attribution, right? In terms of whether we do it ourselves or we do it through partnerships, but being able to provide to you guys as customers, but even more importantly to advertisers, because you guys are funding the whole advertising ecosystem, basically the tools to be able to operate all across that funnel in the process.
And Deborah, have you got any thoughts on measurement there from a Disney's perspective?
Not measurement. I've talked about measurement, but I'll talk a bit about trust, because I think it's just been mentioned. Television is still the most trusted medium. And I think I just, on behalf of the broadcasters in the room and on behalf of Disney, I just want to touch on that for a moment, because we do have the power to influence. And I think it was one superhero that said, with great power comes great responsibility. So I think the reality is that television is still, all of our programming is vetted, all of our advertising is vetted, and audiences know that, and advertisers truly appreciate it. The trust that people have is not just from the quality and the big brand environment, it's because of the practices, very important practices. And we at Disney recognize also that our brand has a great responsibility, and we layer over that certain safeties on top of what others would normally do, because we're very conscious of the fact that we have young viewers and co-viewing as well. So just want to kind of emphasize it's still TV, guys, that's got the most trust. But I'm very happy that the rest of the industry is taking measures to improve, because that helps all of us.
Yeah. Well, let's stick with you. Let's talk about Disney a bit more. So obviously, in the industry, we've seen waves of sort of consolidation of buying and then fragmentation of buying. It seems to sort of
pendulum.
Yeah, exactly. And more recently, it does feel like there has been that shift to slightly more local, people wanting to make things hyper-personalized, super relevant to the local market. And Disney's a global company, but obviously, I think you were saying you operate in quite a local way across EMEA.
We're a global platform, and we benefit from having the world's best, arguably, content and brands that are global. So we do have advertisers that want to work with us on a global or multi-local basis, especially around big moments. Think about the drop of the Bear or the Mandalorian or Shogun or a great Lilo and Stitch movie. But the reality is television planning and buying is local, and it's going to remain so. It is. It's a local business. If you try and operate on a global or multi-local basis, that's just not where the market is. It's all local. And as I said earlier, I'm really pleased that we've been operating in advertising. We're not a newbie in this region for decades, and we've built very strong local partnerships. And we try and develop our business in a way that the advertisers and agencies appreciate and want to work with us. So that's however you want to buy us. What are your preferred DSPs, as long as they're good quality? You know, what marketplaces make sense? And from measurement, you know, a very localized way. And I think one interesting example as well of how we take that is we've, even from a sales perspective in markets, worked with a broadcaster. So, for example, in Scandinavia, we work with TV2 and TV4 who sell our inventory in a partnership way, and with RTL in the Netherlands, like we do for linear in the UK with Sky. So, look, for now, and I think for the foreseeable future, television planning and buying is local. And we benefit from being a global platform, but of course we want to serve the local markets in which we operate and have been doing for some time. I don't think that's going to change, honestly, for TV for a very long time.
That's interesting. Thank you. And then obviously, from Adobe's perspective as an advertiser, when we do roll something out that's super local, we always see better results. So it goes without saying, really. But we were talking earlier, Stephen, and you were saying how you've also got some interesting insights around inclusivity and representation in advertising, and how they also drive better outcomes. Did you want to talk a bit more around that?
Yes, it's a fascinating thing, and it's in effect another blindingly obvious thing, is if your advertising looks like the population you're serving, it performs better. And we would all obviously know that intuitively. We want to look more and more like the audiences that we're serving. But there's a fantastic piece of work done by an organisation called the Unstereotype Alliance. And it was a global study, 400 campaigns across 40 markets across 4 years. And it found that the more inclusive the advertising is, i.e. the more it looks like the society it's serving, the better it performs. It performs better in the short term, but it performs particularly well in the medium term. So in terms of building brand value, building brand loyalty. So in a sense, doing the things that often within the industry, we run a program in the UK called All In, as an example, which is about making the UK industry a place where everybody is welcome. But that's in effect to make sure the industry reflects better the population it's serving. So it's not there, it's not there for a sort of altruistic reasons. Actually, there's some very good commercial reasons why being more inclusive in the advertising is actually good for everybody's business, and it also correlates very strongly with trust. To the point that Deborah was making about trust, everybody gets a lift from that campaign. Broadcasters is the most trusted medium. That gets a big lift amongst those that are aware that it's regulated. So there's things that, in effect, like the rising tide floats all the boats. And I think being more inclusive, being more sustainable, and ultimately, particularly being more trusted, is not just good for the industry in terms of business performance, it's good for us in terms of public acceptance as an industry, avoiding regulation, et cetera, et cetera. So, it's I think what should be everybody's mantra is to think about how we can be more trusted.
Amazing. Okay, so we've only got 1 minute left. So let me ask you all each maybe one final question. And in terms of this is a panel about the future of advertising. If there was one trend you would recommend everyone be looking out for in the next 12 months, what would you recommend? Let's start with you, Stephen, while you're there.
Well, it's obviously going to be the application of AI, but I think it's going to be about the learning that people have between the interaction between humans and AI, because that's the superpower. It's the interaction.
Brilliant. Shruti?
I'll build on that, specifically business messaging. Really, really bullish on the power of the interactions between people and businesses on messaging platforms where they're reaching their friends and family. 600 million messages that are getting exchanged daily between businesses and people exactly speak to that. You can do your authentication, you can increase your cross-sell, upsell your products, and create those wow points as much as address pain points for your customers through that one-on-one messaging channel. Please come find me. I'm happy to talk more about it, but that is the one big thing.
Patrick?
I'm going to be a bit pessimistic about one topic. It's very, very important for me. We own a small business called TGI, which does a lot of consumer survey. There's an interesting survey we're going to publish soon, and I'm the father of 2 young adult women. that shows that the young men population across Europe is having very, very adverse opinion about the role of women in society, and it's gone backward a lot. So I know trust of advertising is going up, but I think trust in other things is going down, and I'm terrified by that in terms of what it means. So I encourage everyone to read TGI survey, because it's an interesting piece of reading. I mean, one example, it shows that in Germany, young men aged 20 to 24, 5 years ago, you asked them, do you think the role of the woman in the boardroom? 89% would say absolutely. That's gone down to 52%. It's terrifying.
Great. It's good news, Deborah.
Yeah, on that note, I'm glad to see we've got 3 women and 2 men on the panel, so that's good. So it has to be streaming and advertising. 12 months is not very far away. That's on us already. Trust, quality, power of television combined with more data and analytics and outcomes, and it's a killer combination.
Amazing. Well, thank you, everyone. Hope everybody loved the panel. Thanks. I think we're done, and I'm going to introduce your final session, I think, now. So thank you to our panelists. You can leave.